Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, Andean Adventure. Discover Wild Patagonia. Presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Dan Hagaman. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you for being here with us today. Take it away, Dan.
Hey everyone, it's really good to be here, and thank you, Rob, for letting me present today. I'm excited about this presentation. This is one of the places that is near and dear to my heart that I love guiding in, and year after year, I just look forward to guiding in this place, Patagonia. It's a big area, so what I'd like to do, I'll introduce myself. My name is Dan Hagaman, Daniel. And then I'll get into the location and the itinerary for the trip. This is kind of a prepare before you go type of presentation. And then I'd like to get into kind of preparing and packing for this trip. There's some gear that would be essential gear that you might want to bring along on this trip. And then getting into details of the trip, transportation, accommodations, and some of those activities that you'll be participating in or have the opportunity to participate in when we're down in Patagonia. So let's get started here. A little introduction about myself. My background is conservation ecology. I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison and kind of a land conservation management focus. And my wife and I have been teaching many years down here in Patagonia, but also in the rest of Latin America. But I've been a photography guide and naturalist with NatHab for about 10 years now. I work in Alaska, in Patagonia, in Mexico with monarch butterflies, and then in some of the national parks. Currently, we live in Western Colorado, but we're taking a few months. We're actually living down here. There's my wife Esther and my son Ruben, who's 12. We're living down here in Ecuador. So I'm right on the equator right now. It's quite warm. I kind of look forward. Tomorrow I actually take off for Patagonia. So I will meet some of you down there. I look forward to some cooler weather. And I'll explain where Patagonia is here. I think it's probably good to start with that. Patagonia is a big region. It's like the southern tip of South America. It ranges all the way from the Chilean side and all the way over to Argentina on the east. Definitely south of both Santiago and Buenos Aires, which is about 35 degrees south, much north of where we're going to be in Patagonia. But Patagonia is a big region, and it's a very diverse region. You can see there are ice caps, there are very wet areas, and there are very dry areas. So there are both deserts and rainforests in the area that's considered Patagonia. And we will have a chance to see some of those different environments on our trip. We will be meeting initially on this departure in a town called Calafate. Calafate is named after a bush that was used to chink wooden ships at one time. But it's also the name of a bush. Calafate berry is a berry that's called the Patagonian blueberry. But that's the town that we'll be in. It's a pretty isolated location. And you can see here the southern Patagonian ice field. Now there are a couple different ice fields. They're the largest ice fields outside of Greenland and Antarctica. The southern Patagonian ice field extends for 220 miles. And so for most of this departure, we will be close to that southern Patagonian ice field. There's also a smaller northern Patagonian ice field and the Darwin's ice field, which is further south. But for the most part, we are starting out in Calafate. Then we will explore the area near that large lake there that you see called Lago Argentino. And the first part of the trip will be focused on glaciers and mountains, and then the second part of the trip will be more focused on wildlife. So if you take a look at this particular map, this is the itinerary that we have for our Patagonia departure. We will spend some time around Calafate and go up to spend about half of that time within Argentina, and then we will cross the border into Chile. We visit basically two national parks. One of the parks that's in Argentina, which is Glaciers National Park, and then also a famous park on the Chilean side, which is Torres del Paine National Park, and so you may have heard of those. We will also visit areas that are private protected areas that are near those national parks. The only difference here between the departures that are photo departures and the non-photo departures is an addition of 2 days for the photo departures, where we will visit the town of Chalten and stay at a place, and I'll mention the location, and we'll be staying at some place called the Ecodomes, Patagonian Ecodomes, and that will be an addition of 2 days. So instead of a 11-day trip, it will be a 13-day trip for the photo trips. Okay. Patagonia is all about the landscapes, just epic, epic landscapes. These are the horns of Torres del Paine, which are really impressive. They're made up of different layers of rocks that provide that depth and the different coloration. And you can see in the foreground here is an area that has been devastated by a forest fire in the past, but this area is recovering. There's been some large fires that have really changed the forest in certain areas that we'll be visiting, especially in Torres del Paine. It's also about glaciers. This is a trip where glaciers play a very important part. It is the third largest ice field in the world, and we will visit both Perito Moreno Glacier and another glacier called the Uppsala Glacier. And we'll get kind of up close. We'll be taking some boat trips to get to these locations. On the Chilean side, later on in the trip, we'll be talking a lot about and seeing a lot of wildlife. And one of the animals that is one of my favorite is this one here, which is the wild relative of the llama. And there are 4 different species of llama. Are llama-like camelids in South America, and the wild relative of the llama is the guanaco. The main predator of the guanaco is the puma. And there is a chance to see pumas. I can't say that we see them on every departure, but because of conservation efforts that are happening in both private and public areas in Patagonia, pumas are having a comeback, in part because the guanacos are having a comeback in these locations. So the more guanacos, which is the natural prey of the puma, the more pumas are present. And they are getting used to seeing people in this area. I think this is one of the spots in the entire world where you can see pumas on a fairly regular basis. But it's not guaranteed, as most wildlife is not guaranteed, but there's a high percentage chance that we could see some. One of the reasons we are working with some private estancias is that there's a better chance that we might be able to see puma where there's some conservation projects where they're trying to bring them back. Another one of the attractions of Patagonia is just the culture. Have you heard of the term gaucho? Gaucho is like a Patagonian cowboy. We will be meeting some gauchos, and we will also be spending some time in areas where there's still active ranches. The Cerro Guido on the Chilean side is one of those ranches. I'll talk about that here in a minute. So preparing and packing for this trip is a little bit complicated in the fact that you might have, in one day, you might have 4 different seasons. You can have snow in the morning, then you might have a little bit of rain, and then you might have a clear sunny afternoon in the afternoon, and then high winds. So it's one of those trips where you need to come prepared for the weather. It is an area that is known for its high winds, and so having a windbreaker and dressing like an onion, we say, dressing like an onion is important. Dress in layers, make sure you have some under layers and then some insulating layers, and then definitely bring your rain gear. Very important. You can see how people are dressed here. This is a cold, windy day. You can see people wearing hats and gloves, rain pants, and rain jackets just to protect them from the wind because it's cool, it's chilly. This is in the morning. So just come prepared. Hiking poles are another great addition. And definitely some sturdy hiking boots. You can see how people are dressed here. This is that same trip. It's a cooler day. There's a little bit of wind, but hiking boots, tripods sometimes are helpful. I don't find that for me as a photographer, I don't want to carry the extra weight. Every once in a while on a few trips, I bring a tripod because kind of later on in the season, there might be an opportunity to take some more night photography. And I do like the night photography, but at this time of year, where there's still lots of light, the night photography is limited. Later on in the year also, you end up getting more photography centered on fall foliage of the southern beech trees. And that's also nice to have your tripod. And that would be more or less in April. So you can see how binoculars are a great idea. One of the guests here on the left has a tripod. I'm just going to show you a few images here. This is one of the places that we go to where we're using spotting scopes and a tripod. You can see there's high winds at this point, but we're kind of looking off over the edge into an area that's a conservation area for wildlife and puma conservation. But we're dressed pretty warm. We've got multiple layers on. It's still a cool, windy morning. Just to give you an idea of what I have in my camera bag, this is probably more than I would take on a normal trip. But I definitely bring chargers. I bring one camera body for myself. I don't tend to bring more than one, and I bring usually 2 lenses. One longer lens, like a 200 to 600, which is what I have here, and then I bring 24 to 105. And those are the 2 lenses that I would bring. I sometimes bring a macro lens. If it's early or late in the season, I might have a macro lens that would allow me to get some nice close-up shots of flowers or the fall foliage. Definitely bring your chargers. And I find an extension cord to be a nice thing to bring on this trip because there are limited outlets. There are also, let's see, in my binoculars, and then I see, the different wall chargers. Here's the 2 places that we're going to be visiting. These are the outlets that are in Chile and Argentina, and make sure that they're able to handle 220 volts versus the 110 that we have here in the States. So make sure that all of your chargers are designed for that. Let's see. Introducing, so Chile and Argentina, the pesos, you don't have to bring a whole lot of money, extra money along, because all of it will be included in the trip. So we pay for tips for guides and hotels, and but if you do want to bring something down and purchase something down there, the exchange rate is more or less $1 US per 1,000 Argentine pesos or Chilean pesos. That's the rate right now. And there will be chances to take out Argentine pesos in Calafate, but there will not be a chance to take out Chilean pesos until you're pretty much done with the trip. So either do that ahead of time, but US dollars are widely accepted in most places. You can use credit cards in Chile and Argentina. And you can also bring US dollars. Try to bring dollars that are clean and crisp, that don't have any writing or rips in them. They're easier to exchange down there. And they're more appreciated by the locals who have a hard time exchanging bills that are damaged in any way. Okay. Okay, first day. This is dealing with transportation. We will be on the Argentine side, we'll be taking these larger buses. Similar to this, all of us will fit in the bus. We'll have more than enough room for all of us. One of the hotels that we stay at is behind the bus there. Very comfortable accommodations. Just talking about all the different transportations that we might be going or using. This is one of the boats that takes us out on Lago Argentino to go to Estancia Cristina. We'll be taking this boat to and from, or a boat similar to this, to and from Estancia Cristina. We'll be staying one night at Estancia Cristina and then coming back to Calafate. At Estancia Cristina, we take these 4x4 vehicles, and we can all fit in one of these vehicles. I think that's a passenger, 14 passenger vehicles, and we'll go up and visit the Uppsala Glacier, but it's kind of a rough 4-wheel drive road to get up there. On the day that we visit Perito Moreno Glacier, we'll take this boat here, which will take us out. We'll visit the lakeside, we'll get close to the glacier, and then we'll get out, and then we'll do the walkways nearby the glacier later on in the evening. So this is just other transportation that we might be using. Once we pass over into Chile, we will be using Sprinter vans, we'll be using 4-wheel drive vehicles, Sprinter vans primarily with Patagonia Camp. And then at Estancia Cerro Guido, we'll be using these 4-wheel drive vehicles. We'll be splitting up into various groups to get to the locations on their property to go wildlife viewing. So with accommodations, we'll be staying at multiple places. The location in Calafate is called the Mirador del Lago, or there's also there's a couple different ones. We stay at a couple different ones in Calafate. This is the one that we're primarily using this year. Comfortable, they have a hotel. This would not be all inclusive, but primarily the other places that we'll be staying are all inclusive, where they include, this is the Mirador del Lago, very comfortable rooms. The photo trips, so the addition of the photo trips, we'll be staying at a place called Patagonia Ecodomes or Chalten Camp, within views of the mountain that is quite famous down there called Fitzroy. That's in Glaciers National Park. And it has views from the domes themselves of the mountain Fitzroy. And that's one reason why we stay here. This will be for 2 nights, and then we will head back then to Calafate. It's just outside the town of Chalten. There is limited Wi-Fi and phone service here. And so we will talk about that before the trip begins, depending on where we will be staying. These are the domes. If you've never stayed in a geodesic dome, they are amazing. I love living in the round. It's a beautiful structure. The rooms are very comfortable. There's bathrooms attached. Everything that you need is right there. And then there's a dining dome that you would meet up with the rest of the guests and have meals. Estancia Cristina, is the second place that we'll be staying. The first place that we'll be staying on non-photo trips. And it will be that boat ride. And we'll take a boat ride up to this beautiful location that's very close to some of the glaciers. You can see North Mountain in the background there. This is the dining area. Here are some of the accommodations. Just a beautiful remote setting that was once private land. It was right next to the glacier. Now it's run by the national park and concessioned out for a company that runs the services there. Very comfortable accommodations, like all the places that we stay. After those two locations, we go from Argentina and we cross over on into Chile. So we'll be having a border crossing. We have to have our documents together. We'll talk about that border crossing ahead of time, and we'll sign some paperwork. Once we get across the border, it'll take 4 hours to get to the border, another 3 hours beyond the border to get to our next location. So this is one of those long travel days, and we'll be in both a bus on the Argentine side, and then we'll be in one or two Sprinter vans on the Chilean side once we cross the border. And then we head to this place called Estancia Cerro Guido. It's one of my favorite places, and this is a new addition to the trip this year. Cerro Guido is trying to do some very unique tourism, but also conservation, and they're still a very active ranch. And so they're trying to do both puma viewing and conservation, but also they're actively managing a ranch and doing conservation with trying to reintroduce certain animals like pumas in conjunction with managing a ranch, trying to protect the animals from predation using certain techniques like dogs is one of those techniques that they're using. They're also using lights and sounds. So they're trying to have both. They're having their cake and eating it too, in some ways, where they're able to do both puma conservation and learning more about the pumas that are in the area, and then also learning how to protect the animals in that area from predation. It's a fascinating project, and they're working with a company, nonprofit called Pantera on this project. This is an old English hacienda. When wool was high in price and many of the ranches were selling wool overseas. And so it's it's got some really quaint accommodations. Patagonia Camp is the next location that we will be staying. And this is a place that is, it's different than what you have on the Cerro Guido side of the mountains. Is east of the national park, Torres del Paine. Even though it's right next to the park, it borders the national park, and we'll have some time to go in and visit the national park. It actually is a property that borders the park. It's a very dry steppe land area. It's one of the drier areas. And then you start crossing over onto the other side of the mountains, and you end up getting a very lush more of a rainforest environment where there's lots of southern beech trees. And this is Patagonia Camp. So we'll have an opportunity. This will be on the western side of the park. And you can see that it's a very different landscape. There's lakes everywhere. There's really lush forests. The southern beech trees, the flowers here are amazing. And the viewpoints. From here, you can see Torres del Paine off in the distance there. And the accommodations are just exceptional. This is the dining room, which has views of the mountains, and then we will be staying. Here's our kind of our prepping room where we're able to pick and choose our own adventure for the day, whether it be hiking, whether it be going to some viewpoints along the way, going to see some waterfalls, or checking out some of the local hikes. These are all possibilities here. And what we'll do is split up into different groups, depending on what we would like to do for that day. If it's a difficult hike you want to accomplish, or if it's in kind of an easy stroll, then that's a possibility. And we'll probably split up into different groups here. And we tend to use all these amazing local guides that will then give us an exceptional experience. The accommodations here, so this is the other chance that we'll have for living in the round, is yurt life. So we'll be staying in yurts. There are bathrooms attached to the yurts as well. They're very comfortable accommodations, and then there's one large environment, or one large building where we will have dinner and lunch. Okay. Getting into some of the culinary um, culinary treats of Patagonia. You may have heard of Argentina being the land of meat. It's not just a land of meat. It's got many. You're not going to have a big steak for every meal, but it is probably one of the highlights if you do end up like eating meat. But they have very good salads and very good vegetarian options at all the places that we're staying. We can accommodate really any dietary need on these trips. If you want to learn a little bit more about mate, mate is one of those things that is definitely highly prized, probably more than coffee is in Argentina especially, but in Patagonia region in general. Mate is it's a very strong herbal tea that's drunk with a straw with a filter on the end. And here's instead of a coffee aisle where there's hundreds of different varieties of coffee in Argentina, you might have hundreds of different varieties of mate in the grocery store. It's one of those differences that you see in Latin America, especially here in Argentina. You might also have heard of the cordero al palo, or the lamb roast, the Patagonian lamb roast, and many you'll have a chance to see and participate in this if you want. But a lot of the lamb or the meat is roasted over an open fire, traditional Patagonian style. A lot of the meals that we're going to be having, especially lunches, we'll have in the field because we want to take advantage of just being outside and seeing some incredible places. And so we'll have some field lunches that are very well set up with a lot of different options. This is a field lunch that we do near Perito Moreno. And we'll have different options. Sometimes one day if we decide we want to spend a day out hiking in the national park, we might pack a lunch on the right-hand side there. We're packing our own lunch. We're just kind of eating it on the trail. And then we might come back later on the left-hand side and get some hors d'oeuvres and some beverages and have a nice relaxing dinner at one of the lodges. In general, we're eating all together as a group. The groups are, I think the group size is about between 8 and 12 people on these trips. And it's a good number to have on these trips. We'll be eating at restaurants, different places along the way. In many cases, we'll be eating at the lodges that we stay at because they are all kind of all inclusive and there's no other restaurants nearby. This is in a place in Calafate where we're beginning our trip. This is our first meal. So for hiking and activities, this is a place where people want to go to hike. And so hiking is one of the activities that we're going to try to get you out there as often as we can. And the hikes can vary depending on your level and what you want out of it. They can be 6 miles, they can be 8 miles if you want, they can be 3 miles if you want. But we're trying to accommodate different levels of activities. This is a hike that we're doing. This is about a 7-mile hike that we did with this group. You can see people are dressed pretty warmly. They have trekking poles, nice hiking boots. But the landscapes here in Patagonia are just incredible. And it is one of the premier hiking places in the world, I think. People come here to do these epic hikes. I don't think we're not going to be doing the epic hikes, but we are going to be doing hikes depending on your skill level and what you want to accomplish out of the trip. We use local guides. This is Christian. He's our local geologist. He is fantastic to work with. He'll be going up with us to the Perito Moreno Glacier and spending a day with us. So we use local guides in all the locations that we go to. This is the Perito Moreno Glacier. You can see the hiking is on these metal catwalks. We might do a couple miles in here on those catwalks. Before this particular hike that we do, we'll be spending some time on a boat, seeing the glacier up close. But then this is one of those exceptional spots in the world where you can see this glacier that's coming right at a peninsula that sticks out on land where they've built these catwalks. It's just an exceptional location. The Perito Moreno Glacier is right there in front of you. This is another Daniela. She works for Cerro Guido. She's showing us a video of one of the camera traps that we'll have a chance to check out some of the camera traps that they've set up on their property to see if there's been any activity of animals. And you can see that there's a puma or a mountain lion right there that she's showing us a video of. This is part of the conservation project that we're working with. Some of the other hikes that we'll be doing, there's lots of waterfalls and shorter hikes, viewpoints that we can go to. On some days, you have cold days like that last picture. There was a cold, windy day. This is a day with no wind at all. And you can see the reflection of the mountains, of the Cuernos in the lake there. Just exceptional. For some activities, especially later on in the season, we will be trying to get up and doing some more photography of both the morning and late at night, like sunrise and sunset. It gets a little bit difficult to do that when we have extended days. But towards the end of the season in April especially, this is more of a possibility. And most of the places that we're staying have great locations for just going outside and taking pictures right outside your accommodation. Here's some examples of some viewpoints. We're bringing out this is a photography group that we were leading last year. And we went up to this viewpoint and we kind of got set up and we were just kind of waiting for the mountains to clear. And we spent a good amount of time here with a group, not a very active group, but this group wanted to photograph. And so we spent some time doing that and photographing this in this particular location. Like I mentioned before, the cultural connection of especially the active ranching culture is also part of the story that we're telling here. Active ranching culture being very much involved with sheep and cattle production in the areas on the big ranches. This is one of the hikes that we will do near the Perito Moreno Glacier. You can see kind of the taller trees here with the icebergs in the background on Lago Argentino. This is the kind of trails that we'll be taking. It's a rustic trail, but it's a well-groomed. Few rocks in the way, but a fairly easy hike, only about 1.5 miles. Really, one of the main attractions here in Patagonia is the wildlife and photography. And nothing is guaranteed with wildlife, but I'll point out some images here of some of the wildlife that we might see along the way, just to inspire you all. Sometimes the wildlife comes right up to the road. This is right next to the road. Some of the wild llamas, the guanaco, ended up coming right by. Gave us some great opportunities to take photos right near the road. The Andean deer. This is one of those conservation projects that is happening. They're trying to reintroduce Andean deer in a couple spots throughout Chile and Argentina, but they've been very reduced in numbers over time. And so this is one of those conservation efforts that we'll talk more about on this trip. And also the condor. This is actually taken by, this is probably the best photo. This is my favorite photo of the entire trip. Is actually, I'm down there taking a photo of the condor up above. This is an Andean condor, but one of the guests was taking a picture of me, taking a picture of the condor. And so it was just kind of fun to put these two photos together, because there's the photo of me taking the picture, and here's the photo of the picture that ended up coming out of that. So it was kind of a fun image to share the two of them together. The condor and the Andean deer are both in the coat of arms for Chile. So they're very important animals, although both of them are fairly reduced in number, and there's conservation efforts to save both of them in the area. They are having a comeback. Another animal that's having a comeback in the area, like I said before, it's not guaranteed you're going to see puma on this trip, but it's more probable here than probably any other place probably in the world, because they have had a comeback because they are protected on the Chilean side, and they are starting to protect them in areas in Argentina as well. And so the conservation effort to save these animals is increasing. There's amazing opportunities, and you just kind of luck out on some of these when they happen, but there's no way to predict them. There's also a couple different types of fox, the Cupeo fox, which is here, the red fox, and there's a gray fox as well. Some of the birds, like here, this is the austral pygmy owl, which is exceptional. Sometimes it's a diurnal owl, so it comes out in the day. You got the Magellanic woodpecker here, which you find in those forested areas. Here's the Darwin's rhea. There's an up close. It's a smaller, same family as the ostrich and the ratite family. Here's some Chilean flamingos that we see frequenting the lakes later on in the season when that water melts out and the lakes are full. Here is a rufous collared sparrow on a calafate bush. I just love all the birding. For me, is an amazing addition for this trip. So if you're a birder, you're going to love this trip, because there's birds that you see here that you don't see anywhere else. This is a southern lapwing. You've got a Patagonia sierra finch. I just love the colors here. And this is kind of one of those morning, perfect time of day to take pictures, kind of that golden hour. This is a Plumbeus rail. Found in one of the areas, the wetland area in Argentina. And then you have the austral parakeets, which are quite boisterous. One of the joys later on in the season, like if you're talking about April, later on in the season, fall colors end up happening with the southern beech trees. So there's 3 different species of southern beech. A couple of them are deciduous, and the 2 deciduous ones end up turning these bright colors in the fall, very similar to what you would have in the Midwest. Here's just a couple landscapes. This is Fitzroy in the background with an estancia, or a large ranch here on the left-hand side and down. And if the weather's clear, then it's possible to see Fitzroy off in the distance. And some days you just luck out and you get some crystal No wind, blue sky days like this. That's just to give you an idea of some of the photography that's available for, on this trip. Um, I think what I'd like to do, I'm finishing up here, but what I'd like to do is just, I think there are some stories that are really of interest on this Patagonia trip. And one of them is the idea of climate change. Climate change, we're going to see climate change happen, especially with the glaciers. And also, we're going to see also land protection within the national park and also within private holdings. And we're also going to talk about the reintroduction and protection of certain animals like the puma. And it's just an amazing location. There's lots of stories to tell. You're going to really enjoy this trip. It's a fascinating place to go. And I think I'm going to finish with that. Rob?
All right. Thank you, Dan. Now, before we dive into the questions, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in your control panel. So let's just dive into some of these questions. Can you tell us what is the elevation at Patagonia Camp?
So none of the elevations we're looking at low elevations. I mean, some of the mountains are upwards of 10,000 feet, but the elevations at the camps are, I think, 2,500 feet would be one of the highest elevations. So we're not looking at high elevation areas, even though it may look that way. The Andes at this point, um, in the Andes is a pretty low in elevation. It's not the central Andes that might be upwards of 20,000 feet. This is um, Patagonian Andes are low. Okay.
Gotcha. So not a lot of extreme altitudes on this trip.
No, no, you wouldn't
That
get anywhere above 5,000 feet.
Gotcha. We
Yeah.
appreciate that. Um, so when we're on the buses, is everyone going to have a window seat, and how many people are actually on the trip?
So there are, I think the limit on this trip is 12. And so you might have upwards of 12 guests on this trip. And on the buses, everyone would have a window seat. On the other vehicles, we are limited by the vehicles because there are four-wheel drive vehicles. And so not everyone will have to rotate around to get back into those more remote areas. So not everyone would have a window seat on those vehicles because we're limited on space and buses just wouldn't make the trip. So if we're going to remote areas,
Gotcha.
yeah,
Thank you for that.
yeah.
So do we need to tip the local guides separately, or will that be handled through the expedition leader?
No, we will tip if you feel like. I mean, I'd like to say this to guests if they feel like somebody went above and beyond and did an exceptional job, then feel free to tip a little extra. That's great, and we can pool those tips if you want. But in general, we will be tipping the local guides.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So is there a best time of year to go where there'll be the most wildlife, or does NatHab kind of choose the best times?
So we begin these trips in November, and I think our last trips are in April. And so there are different things. Like if you go in November, let's say, you might have more wildflowers, and there might still be some snow in the mountains, and it might still be a little cool. And then midsummer, like right now, this time of year, it's going to be warmer. The days might be warmer. Sometimes that's good. If you're early in the morning, it's good. Sometimes good for wildlife, but then during the heat of the day, it might not be as good for wildlife if it's a warm day. But the days can vary so much. Um, Towards the end of the year, April, then you end up getting more of the fall colors. And so it really depends on what you want. I think any time of the year is great for wildlife. I think in the future it would be nice to even do some winter trips down there. Don't, because I think wildlife in the winter is easier to see. It's easier to see tracks, and this might be something that we could add later. But this is right now we're doing these trips between November and April. Um, I don't think the accommodations are there for winter trips at this point in time.
All right. Well, we look forward to that
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Um, so let's talk about the hikes for a moment. How long are the hikes, and are there shorter hikes that can be arranged if I'm just physically not capable of doing it?
Yeah, we try to accommodate everyone. So we will split up into multiple groups if needed, and we have local guides to help us. So we might have one group that would go out and do an easier hike, another group that would go to a moderate hike, and another group that might do a more challenging hike. And there might be an opportunity to join other groups that are doing more difficult hikes. So if your goal is to really do a serious hike, then we can match you up with another group that's trying to do that hike at Patagonia Camp and then get you out to get some exercise. Okay, so I think it's very flexible.
Gotcha. Thank you. Let's talk about equipment for a second, things that we should bring. What kind of hiking boots do you recommend? Do they need to be above the ankle or lower, or is that just a matter of preference?
I think hiking boots that you feel comfortable with. So if you are comfortable hiking in a mid top or a low top, I think that's fine. Just make sure that you've used the boots recently and that they are comfortable on your feet so you're not getting any blisters. So make sure you break them in ahead of time. And I prefer to have a sturdier pair of boots personally, but I know other guides tend to use low top boots. I like a high top leather boot personally, but that's my preference.
Gotcha. But comfortable broken in shoes. We got it.
Yeah,
What about hiking poles? Should I bring my own, or will there be some available to me if I don't want to bring those?
there will be some available at the different locations, but if you are used to the ones that you have and they pack up nice and small, then you might just want to bring your own. Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What about insect repellent? Is that something I'll need in March or on the trip at all?
Some days, yes, I would say bring a small thing of insect repellent. There's not many. It's more of there are some small biting midges and flies and some horse flies, but there are not many mosquitoes. There's usually some good wind, but on those non-windy days, sometimes the mosquitoes, will come out or the flies will come out and be a little bothersome, but it's not like Alaska in that way or the Midwest in the summertime because of the wind.
So what about my jacket? How heavy or insulated should it be, would you say?
Well, I tend to I take multiple t-shirts and then a long sleeve thermal shirt, and then I bring a puffy jacket, and then on the top, and then I have a vest that I use that's like a fleece vest, and then I have my rain jacket on top of that. So if I need that, and that's what I will bring on my trips. And I do bring a hat and I bring gloves just in case on those really cold days. Um, and that might be something that you don't use throughout the entire trip, but it might be something that would come in very handy to have on certain days when it does get cold. So I like to be prepared in that way.
Sounds good to me. Um, what about a tripod for us photographers? Is that something that we should consider bringing?
I think for me, I tend to bring a tripod. I probably will bring some for the photo trips um, because it's later on in the season where there's a better chance of the ability to take night photography and also some landscape photography. with fall colors. But in general, like for wildlife, I wouldn't use them. I would not use it for most shots. I would just hand hold my camera. Um, I think I usually, yeah, it's just, it's not that convenient to get it in and out of the vehicle all the time. If it's a light tripod, then I would say, go ahead and bring it and see if you can't get some nice shots. Um, it allows you a little more stability.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. So what about our bags? Is there a weight issue or a weight limit? And is there a certain type of suitcase, whether it's a hard case or a duffel, that is best to bring?
I think I like to bring one kind of a roller bag, so a roller duffel. And then I do like to have on this particular departure, we will be doing one night at Estancia Cristina. And on that one night, we only need to have a small amount, we'll only need to have our supplies for one day. And then we'll be coming back to our larger bags. So it is nice to have a small duffel just in case we need to transport gear for one night. So I would recommend that. I would recommend bringing a small duffel that would pack up and fit inside of your kind of your roller bag.
Gotcha. Good. That's
Yeah.
a good idea. Um, so all the vehicles, they all have windows in them that we can be taking photographs through, or the windows can come down we can take photographs. Can you just explain how the vehicles do work?
Well, the vehicles vary quite a bit. So we'll have everything from Land Cruisers, like these four-wheel drive, four-passenger vehicles, to large, medium-sized buses. And some of them will come down. If there is not the ability to lower the window, then we'll probably hop out and be going in and out of the vehicle and stop at a few spots along the way to get out and take pictures where it's safe to do that.
Great. So there will be ample time for us to stop and take pictures of the landscape, or
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah.
Even during those long trips.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we definitely want to make that a priority to get people out and get the pictures that you want to capture the moment.
Well, speaking of photography, is there a photo version of this trip as well?
Yeah. So the photo version is the 2 days, it's 2 extra days. That would be at the beginning of the trip. So from Calafate, we go up to Chalten, and we spend 2 nights at a place called the Ecodomes, and that is near the town of Chalten. And so that would be for the photo trips, that would be the additional 2 days. So it would be a 13-day trip instead of an 11-day trip. The rest of the trip is very similar. During the photo trips, we do like to spend more time on getting the photography, talking about photography, but then also maybe reviewing the photography at the end of the day, trying to give pointers to the guests about how to maybe capture the images that they imagine they want to capture. And it would give us more time in each of the places. So we try to spend more time in the places that we go instead of um, driving straight through or trying to get from point A to point B quicker or hiking faster. So we would spend more time in each of those locations.
Is there any gear that I should expect that NatHab will provide for us?
Uh, we're not sending out, we don't have a lot of gear down there. We will have some luggage tags, but other than that, the gear, oh, and then trekking poles. If you do, we can get trekking poles in each of the locations that we hike at. So that would be something you don't necessarily need to bring. Um, Other than that, you should bring your own gear and make sure that you have water bottles. Water bottles are important. Make sure you have enough water for the day. We're not handing out water bottles at this time.
So, what about trip extensions? Are there any trips in the area that you could recommend to extend with this Patagonia trip?
Well, you kind of end up in Chile, and so a good extension is to spend a little more time on the Chilean side. You've already crossed the border once, or you could extend your trip at the beginning to spend a little more time in Buenos Aires if you want to check out that, because it's culturally it's really unique, and I love spending time there. It's a beautiful city. And then you fly back through Santiago. All the flights go through Santiago, so you could spend more time in Santiago, or you could spend some time. Many of the guests will spend time in the north of Chile, and they'll go to the Atacama Desert, San Pedro de Atacama, and that's a beautiful location, very dry. It's one of the driest places on the planet, and it's great for Atacama Desert's known for wildlife, but it's also known a little bit south of there. There's astronomical observatories in the Calama area. And if you're interested in astrophotography or just seeing the night sky, it's one of the most incredible places on the planet.
So, are there any issues with human wildlife conflicts, particularly with pumas?
At this, no, there's not. I think there's been like what's happening in this area is that pumas are becoming used to seeing people around. They're not being hunted like they were before, so they're not being killed off. So they're getting used to people and not as skittish as they once were because people aren't shooting them. At one time, it was a job on the big ranches to just hunt and eliminate the puma in the area that were considered threats to the livestock. And so I think at this point, very similar to bears in Alaska, I think you have this positive habituation that is happening where pumas don't think of us as a food source necessarily, but they don't think of us as a threat either. But there have not been any incidents that I know of with wildlife encounters, problematic wildlife encounters.
So, Dan, tell me, is there one thing on this trip that you're looking forward to more than anything else?
I think for me right now, I'm sitting on the equator right now, and it's about 80 degrees, and it's about 80, 90 degrees or 90% humidity, and I'm ready for some cool weather and some little little breeze and the mountain views. I just love the landscapes. The landscapes are epic in Patagonia.
Well, great, Dan. Thank you for that. Unfortunately, that is going to be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'd like to throw it back to you for any closing comments you may have for us.
Well, I guess I just like to bring it back. I think it's not necessarily about I mean, the landscapes are amazing in Patagonia, and so are the people. And one of the things that I've been told in Patagonia in general, that the further south you go in Patagonia, the wider people's arms are to embrace you into their home. And I totally feel that every time I go there. I feel like I am welcome into this exceptional place where there's exceptional animals, exceptional wildlife, landscapes, and the people are so welcoming and and it's got such a rich culture. So I hope you come down and visit visit us in Patagonia. It's one of those places that is a must see.
Great, Dan.
So
Well,
thank you.
And thank you, Dan, so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. So if you're interested in information on how you could travel to Patagonia with NatHab, please give us a call at the number on your screen, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. If you're part of a photo club and would like NatHab to speak to your members about nature and travel photography, email us at webinars@nathab.com for more information. Join us tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.